Hello and welcome to a very overdue episode of the Maxi-Geek Show. So excuse me. The plan was to have another episode of the Maxi-Geek Show post PAX, to talk about what was on show there. However, because so many attendees at the show didn't take into consideration any health and safety, I managed to pick up some COVID, and it knocked me around for a couple of weeks, so I've been out for that. But with that all being said and done, I'm mostly over it all and getting much better, so we are back with more Maxi-Geek Show. We're going to sort of change things up, going forward. We're not going to focus all in on every piece of news of the week, purely because sometimes the amount of things happening in that week were quite a bit bigger than I have time for talking. So we're going to sort of just push through it and do what we can do in the time that we have. Now, in terms of the news of the week, there's some big news, there's some weird news, and there's some a topic that I want to talk about towards the end, but we'll get to that in just a moment. But before we sort of push on, we're going to talk about a couple of release dates for some games, and then we'll get into some of the other news. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the fact that Somerville has been dated. So Somerville is a game from many of the folks who worked on Inside and Limbo. So the CEO of this company was the sort of lead designer on those games. They split off to do their own thing, and that thing is Somerville. It is a PC and Xbox only title, at least for now. It may come to other platforms, in the new year, but at this stage it's just those platforms. It is set to launch on November 15th, and it will be available inside of Xbox Game Pass on release date. Now, they do have a release date trailer here. It is, however, an utterly useless trailer because it's just the logo with, different backgrounds playing through it. So what I will do is put on this is 10 months old, this video, so they've been very, very quiet on it. They've not really been showing things off, but it has a very similar vibe to Inside and Limbo, which that's what you would expect given that some of the team from those games is working on this one. But it's not locked to a 2D plane. It's not all about shadows and things like that, so there's a lot more going on than you might think with this one. It is unfortunately, shrouded in secrecy, so even the information we do know is very, very, limited. But yeah, it looks very, very cool. The fact that it is coming into Game Pass means that it should be one that if you have a Game Pass subscription, that you pick up on day one. But yeah, I'm very, very much looking forward to this one. Because, while I wasn't a fan of Limbo so much, there's nothing wrong with it. It just didn't really click with me. Inside was much more appealing for me, so I very much enjoy that one. Another game that got a release date during the week was Wo Long Dynasty, and that is set to release in March of next year, specifically March 3rd of 2023. So Wo Long Dynasty, and I'll pop the trailer on here. It is, I hate to use the term, but it's a Souls-like action game. It's not super Soulsy, like you might be thinking when you hear Souls-like, but it's got sort of that gameplay. Now, the reason why, you definitely will be thinking Souls-like is because it's done by Team Ninja, specifically the same team that worked on Nioh. So Nioh and Nioh 2, that was their, Souls-like, one-to-one comparison. This is sort of their next follow-along, in that sort of same gameplay style. So, again, it's not a traditional Souls-like, but it's a hard game. So the demo that they did release during the Tokyo Game Show the demo was downloaded, a couple of million times, and only around 80,000 people finished it. So, for the amount of people that downloaded the demo compared to the amount of people that did actually finish it, it is quite a bit different. You will have seen that gameplay trailer just said early 2023. That's because this is from TGS. They didn't release any new footage with the release date, just that they were. We also now know that there will be a digital deluxe edition for this game. It'll come with a digital art book and a soundtrack, all that sort of usual digital stuff. But yeah, it is looking like it'll be a fun, time for people that really get into that, genre of games. I'm not a big fan of it. I like a challenge, but I don't like to be punished because I was, 3.4 milliseconds late in dodging, at 18 degrees away from the attack. That's not fun for me, so I tend to avoid those sort of games. Moving on into the world of Dragon Age Dreadwolf, we actually have some pretty epic news. So earlier in the week, a blog post from the BioWare general manager, Gary McKay, was put up, and I'll just read the big sort of part here, which is from the blog post. It says, up to this point, we've been working hard on the various parts of the game, but it's not until the alpha milestone that a game all comes together. Now, for the first time, we can experience the entire game from opening scenes of the first mission to the very end. We can see, hear, feel, and play everything as a cohesive experience. So what that means is that the new Dragon Age game, which has been, teased for a number of years, is in its alpha stage. Hi Steve, thanks for stopping by. I know some people really, really dig the hardcore gaming, but that's just not my thing. But anyway, with Dreadwolf, it is in alpha. So if you're not someone who's aware of sort of the game development process, you'll see betas all the time. There's a closed beta, there's a network beta, there's an open beta, things like that. And betas are usually, the game is finished, it's refined, and they might just be looking for a few, some more things to test to see how things are shaping up. Generally speaking, there's pre-alpha, which is where they may have a vertical slice, which you might see it say something like an E3 presentation, and then there's an alpha stage, and this is where Dragon Age is at now. Alpha is the status where everything is assembled and playable. It's the same sort of status you would see for a movie where everything's cut together, but none of the visual effects are completed, right? None of the sounds there, none of the music's there. Sort of similar things. So with this particular state, what it means is that, as the statement from Gary said, they can now play the entire game from start to finish. It's going to be buggy. It's going to look horrible in places. Some of the textures may not be accurate. They may be, very low resolution, all that sort of stuff. But it is playable. Generally speaking, the time frame between an alpha stage and a beta stage is 9 to 12 months. Some companies can throw more people at it and get it done quicker, depending on the state of the alpha as well. Some alphas can be very, very rough. Some alphas can be very, very refined. We don't know the state of this one, we just know it is in an alpha state. So yeah, it does look like they're finally moving ahead. Do not expect the game out, till maybe very late next year, if at all next year. I think this is going to be a 2024 game. BioWare have sort of learnt from their mistakes with Mass Effect Andromeda. They rushed it out too quick. They had to get something out because people wanted Mass Effect, so they rushed it, and it sort of bit them in the ass. They did make a call out that, if you're looking for BioWare content, they are still working on the new Mass Effect game, Mass Effect 5, that is still in development. That is nowhere near an alpha stage, I guarantee it. But Star Wars The Old Republic is available on PC. We also got word today that Dark Horse Comics is publishing a 4-part prequel series for Dreadwolf, with the first chapter coming out early next year. So I don't know how many pages each book's going to be, but there's 4 parts to it. So so anytime you see a game reach the alpha state, that is when things are coming together. refinements will happen to the gameplay, visual polish will be applied, sound effects will be added, the score will be done, all the bits and pieces that make a game, look great will be applied to it. Obviously, as I said, the beta is the next stage, and then the final stage we sort of see before we get the game is when it goes gold, which is a legacy thing when they used to print to disc as the only method of distributing a game. When you hear that a game's gone gold, it means development is officially completed and the game is, playable in a complete manner. That obviously doesn't mean so much these days because they still will do a lot of, polishing and updates, and you get your day one patches these days. So there's still a lot of stuff that they do there. But generally speaking, once a game's gone gold, if you buy the disc and never have your console connect to the internet, you can still play it and enjoy it in full. So that is something to look forward to there. As the month of October is coming to an end, that means there is obviously a new month on its way, which means there's new games coming as part of the Games with Gold and PlayStation Plus Essentials lineup. For whatever reason, Xbox are being very slow. They haven't released any information yet. We may not get anything until maybe overnight or probably Tuesday morning, because that's what they're doing. But in terms of what's coming from PlayStation, that we know. So on the 1st, which is this coming Tuesday, PlayStation Plus Essentials will turn off the October lineup and add Neo 2, Lego Harry Potter Collection, and Heavenly Bodies. So Heavenly Bodies is actually made here in Australia. It's a Melbourne-based game. The Neo 2 Remastered, depending on the platform you go for, is available for both PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. So if you have a PS5, you'll get the PS5 edition. If you have a PS4, you'll get the PS4 version. The Lego Harry Potter Collection is a PlayStation 4 only title, so it is backwards compatible with PlayStation 5, but there's no advantage to having it on the PlayStation 5. And then Heavenly Bodies is for both. The Lego Harry Potter obviously does include Lego Harry Potter years 1 through 4 and years 5 through 7. So it's, all the 8 movies in Lego form. Obviously, after having played Skywalker Saga, this is a very different Lego game. It's much more of the old style. So it is something to be aware of if you are not, familiar with Lego games. What is interesting though is it is quite the split of genres. As I mentioned before with Wo Long, Fallen Dynasty, Neo 2, same development team. It is a very hardcore action game. There's a lot of brutal combat where all your choices, all your actions have to be spot on, because if you don't nail those aspects, the game can just completely destroy you. So this is very much the same. The big thing with Neo is they use a lot of the Japanese mythology around yokai and spirits and demons, in their mechanics, which we sort of, see some of the stuff in the backgrounds there. So, yeah, that looks very, very fun, especially if you're into that sort of stuff. The PlayStation Plus Deluxe and Premiums, we generally get those updates around the end of the first week of the month, with them going live, around the middle of the month. So there will still be a few days for that one. Moving on, we have some Age of news, specifically some very, very big Age of Empires news, Age of Mythology, and Age of Empires mobile news. So the first thing is that Age of Empires is coming to Xbox next year. So when I say Age of Empires, specifically Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition and Age of Empires 4 are coming to Xbox in the new year. Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition will be arriving first on January 31st, so it is literally 3 months away. What is interesting about this is the Definitive Edition was actually done by Tantalus Studios down in Melbourne. Well, they're officially known as Keywords Melbourne, I think now, when they got bought out. But Tantalus also did, City Skylines, the SimCity-esque game for consoles. They did the console ports, for that series. So they know how to do sort of, a mouse and keyboard style control scheme. There's no confirmation that this is the same studio bringing the game to console. It could be somebody else entirely, but given that they have a history in doing that, it makes sense that Xbox would want to do that. Age of Empires 4, which is celebrating a year this month on PC, it is coming in 2023, but there is no set date for it. Unfortunately, all we have from them is this teaser trailer with the logos. There's no gameplay footage from the console builds. It's all captured on PC, and there's not even any sort of screenshots or what have you for it. But people have been asking for these games to make their way across, and I'm glad that they're finally doing it. It is a little weird that they're not doing all 4 of them or doing them in a release order. They're doing 2 and 4 only. I get it, 2's the popular one, 4's the new one. Makes sense, but it's a little weird that they're doing it that way. Speaking of popular, Age of Mythology is also being redone and is coming out sometime in the future. So it is called officially Age of Mythology Retold, and it is the spin-off series from the Age of Empires brand. So Age of Mythology, its big thing is it's Greek mythology, Roman mythology, all that sort of stuff. The problem is we don't know anything other than that it is coming, and it's coming to PC only. We can say it's exclusive to PC, but Age of Empires 4 was exclusive to PC, and it's now coming to console, so who knows exactly. What we do know, though, is that there's no release date for it, so they're not aiming to have this done anytime soon. How quickly it comes about, we honestly don't know, because it could have just started development, it could be going into development, it could be halfway through. We really don't know anything about it. There's a fair chance that the same studios that have done the Age of Empires 1, 2, and 3 definitive editions are working on this now, given the support and great reception that those games have received. That could be the case. We honestly don't know, and it's there's not much we can do about it. We just know it is coming, which is great to see, but there's nothing for us to talk about beyond that. The other Age of Empires news. So if you're not aware of this, there was an Age of Empires stream during the week where they were celebrating the 25th anniversary of the series. So Age of Empires itself is now 25 years old. Age of Empires 2, I think, is 23 years old. And then after Age of Empires 2, they went to Age of Mythology. So that's why that comes into the timeline. In terms of the other news, that is that Age of Empires Mobile is coming. So Age of Empires Mobile is bringing the series back to mobile. And I say back to mobile because it's actually had quite a number of entries. Unfortunately, again, with this, it's just a teaser trailer. So they hosted a live stream where they announced a bunch of games, and not one of the games that they announced had any sort of actual proof that they exist. They're just all pre-rendered trailers or logos in a trailer. That's it. This is literally the thing. Age of Empires Mobile, there's the logo. Bing, bang, boom, we're done. That's it. We don't know. Obviously, it's going to hit all platforms, all mobile platforms, but we don't know that for sure. What we can say is that the series has had quite a long history on mobile. There was Age of Empires World Domination, which released 2015, and that ran for a couple of years. I actually put them in the story because I remember them. Age of Empires. Yeah, they did one that was made for Windows Phone 8, which most people never ever touched because it was Windows mobile operating system. But a friend of mine was massive into Age of Empires, in the 2000s, and he had a Sony Ericsson phone, and he got Age of Empires 2 for mobile. This is a long play by a YouTuber, Tax Owlbear. This is the deluxe edition that adds a little bit more to the game. But this is literally the mobile game from 2005. So the series has definitely got some long standing traditions in the mobile space. But if we jump ahead a little bit, this is what mobile gaming looked like 17 years ago. So this is 5 years before the iPhone. So it's been a few years. at this point. So yeah, Age of Empires, coming back to mobile. There's no time frame on it. You are correct, Steve. So a lot of the mobile games back then required, they either had, the phones had that little sort of D-pad-ish looking thing in the middle of the screen, below the screen, sort of acted a bit like a control stick, or you had to use 2, 4, 6, and 8 to replicate a D-pad, and 7 and 9 were your confirm buttons and your back buttons, stuff like that. If we want to talk, old school mobile gaming, there's also a bunch of Elder Scrolls games that were released on those phones around that time. So there's a whole series of games that are no longer playable except through emulation, that were done to celebrate the big milestones of games. Big brands going into mobile gaming, before it was actually a thing, because it was an easy way to do it. And if to put it into another context, this is before credit card billing was a thing for phones. So generally speaking, if you're buying these games, you're either texting a number to say, hey, this is the game I want, and it would add to your phone bill, or you were buying it from a store, and they were giving you the sending you a link to download it via your phones. It wasn't even 3G back then, it was EGM, something like that. That's right. It wasn't even 2G back then. So yeah, so there's a lot of really old school games. It might be something fun to look into. But yeah, so yeah, Age of Empires mobile. It is interesting they're doing it. There's also like a DS game in the Age of Empires series, or it might be Age of Mythology. But yeah, there's been a bunch of them. So it's interesting they're doing another one of these. We don't even know who's developing it, which is always a bit of a thing with mobile gaming. It could be an internal thing from Xbox. It could be, World's Edge is the company that Xbox started up to oversee the brand. It could be them doing it. It could be one of the mobile game developers that Xbox now have bought over the years. Who knows? Moving on though to a topic that is somewhat interesting and somewhat not interesting. It's specifically, we're going to be talking about the remakes that are coming. So last week there was a showcase for both Resident Evil had a showcase, Silent Hill had a showcase, and somebody else had a showcase as well, but I can't remember who that was. But there were a bunch of showcases last week. And from all of it, we got a new look at Resident Evil 4, we got the reveal that Silent Hill 2 is getting a remake, and we got the news this week that The Witcher, the first Witcher game, is being remade by CD Projekt Red. And that is sort of where I want to deep dive into these things. So the Resident Evil 4 remake, we actually got a new trailer, and I'll pop it on here. I'll be honest, I'm kind of angry at these remakes for existing. Not because, modern day gamers don't deserve to play them. They look amazing, and I'm sure they'll play well. The problem that I have with these remakes is they're not fun for anyone who's played the original games. And I get why they appeal to these companies, right? This is the 4th remake that Capcom have done for the Resident Evil series. So the very first remake was Resident Evil, the GameCube version of that. That was, they took the original game, they remade it for GameCube, up to the visual quality, 1,000-fold from the PS1 to the GameCube. That game is also now on every other platform. It hit PS2, it hit PC, it hit mobile, it's on Xbox, it's on Switch, these days as well. So, that's available everywhere. They've also now done Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 over the past couple of years. They remade those, and then obviously Resident Evil 4 is now the next one in the series. The reason why I'm not a fan of remakes as a general concept is that they're not doing anything new. They're taking everything we know and they're just making it look prettier. And as far as visuals concerned, visuals aren't what make a game. Visuals help sell a style that you're going for, that help set a tone that you want to, you want your story to be, connected to. Like the Resident Evil 4 storyline wouldn't be interesting as an 8-bit game, right? There's just no way to make the villains, deadly when you're talking about an 8-bit experience. And when you have, a game that exists elsewhere and you remake it, right? And as Steve said here in the chat, Resident Evil 3, the remake of that didn't do well because it wasn't really a remake. But when you take, an existing game and you say, hey, we're going to remake it, right? Dead Space is a prime example. That's coming out next year. The latest gameplay video, they do side-by-sides, and yeah, sure, it looks beautiful, but a remake, where they enhance the visuals, that should be classed as a remaster, right? We have remasters, we get them all the time, and remasters do work. The problem with remakes is that people want to make changes for the sake of making a change. And making a change for that reason isn't a valid reason. It doesn't actually improve anything. Way back in the GameCube days, Konami tapped then Silicon Knights to remake Metal Gear Solid from the PlayStation 1 for the GameCube. It was done under the title of Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes. That game sells minimum now, still, for about $100 and $150 on eBay. It is still a very, very expensive game to get secondhand because it took the original game, but then it merged it with the gameplay of the upcoming Metal Gear Solid 2. So a lot of the gameplay mechanics that the series would then become will put into this game. But if you're a purist of the Metal Gear Solid title, this isn't that game. Yes, the story beats are the same, the characters are the same, the locations are the same. But you're just getting a slightly refined visual style and a slightly tweaked gameplay experience. But that's all you're getting. It doesn't actually make sense for you to replay it. I know someone who does not replay games at all. He's a one and done gamer, which is fine. That's great. That's, honestly what some games should be. But the problem with these remakes, and especially like the Silent Hill 2 one, is that, they go ahead and they say, hey, we're doing, this remake because people really want it. It's like, okay, yeah, great. People always want things, but people don't always know that that's exactly what they should be asking for, right? Some things that gamers demand are stupid ideas, right? So with the Silent Hill 2, I don't like the Silent Hill series. I've never thought it was interesting, right? To me, it's always just seemed like a knockoff Resident Evil. Some people will tell me I'm wrong for that, and that's fine, right? I don't appreciate the Silent Hill series like other people do, and that's perfectly acceptable. The problem, though, is that the Silent Hill series has been AWOL for, a decade, essentially. And even the last few games that they did release, they weren't taking care of the IP. So now they're doing a remake of Silent Hill 2. Not the first Silent Hill, right? They're not remaking the series, in the modern day. They're starting with Silent Hill 2 because that's the popular one. So they're not trying to do this because they want to relaunch the series. They're doing it because they know they can sell this. They know this is an easy buy for fans to say, hey, I played that 20 years ago. I loved it back then. I'll buy this remake. You are correct, Steve. So every time, a remake comes along, it's always by people who loved the original and want to do their version of the original. It's like, okay, yeah, that's fine. Except you don't see Hollywood remaking, movies after 10 years. Sure, visually, not a lot can happen in those 10 years. But again, visuals aren't the selling point for a game. It's the gameplay, right? If you wanted a great story, you can read a book. Yeah, we won't talk about that one. But my point is, every time Hollywood has done a remake, right? So the Fast and the Furious, the original movie with Vin Diesel and Paul Walker, that's a remake, right? But it was some 45 years between the original movie and its remake, right? Ben-Hur got a remake, right? But again, that's some 50 odd years between the original Ben-Hur and the remake. We're not seeing, you know, what's a movie that came out, you know, Iron Man, right? That came out 12 years ago. In the world of video games, that would be prime for a remake, right? That would be prime material to have, you know, redone, so, you know, it could use the new tech to have everything, all the visuals look great and everything. There's a reason why remakes only appeal to a certain demographic, and that's the people who want the shiny visuals. Whereas there are some gamers who will have their retro console, right? They'll have their Xbox original, they'll have their PS1, they'll have their Atari 2600, because the gameplay is what sells them. It's not the visuals, it's what the gameplay itself offers. And then the fact that, you know, within the space of a week, we got a new trailer for Resident Evil 4, we got the Silent Hill 2 announcement, and then The Witcher being announced. Those are all, you know, great announcements, but they're not announcements that needed to happen, because these games don't need to exist. The Witcher, you know, so CD Projekt Red with The Witcher, and then The Witcher 2 Assassination of Kings, right? They grabbed an audience, people who wanted sort of a grittier Elder Scrolls back then, right? It was a different take on the medieval fantasy. Most people had no idea these were based on books when these first two games were announced, right? Even after they released, many people still didn't know about the books. It wasn't until the third game, right, where the visuals caught up to, you know, what people wanted to see. Once that was there, people paid attention to it, right? Then they found the books, you know, the books got more attention, that drew the attention of Hollywood, and we got the TV show. The problem is, the original Witcher game, it's still an enjoyable game, right? It is 15 years old now. It's still a fun game to play if you played it. It does not, however, work in the modern day, because modern day gamers are used to certain things, right? I replayed through all the Bond games, you know, this year, and replaying through the original GoldenEye, there's no health packs in that game, right? So there's body armor, but once you take damage, you know, if you take too much damage, you die and you're done. Whereas, you know, in Halo was the same. You know, you had to wait for your shield to recharge. Modern day games, you know, they have health packs, right? They have adjustable difficulty sliders. So they do everything they can to welcome more folks in. Excuse me. And I get that. I get why that appeals. The problem is, they can remaster the original game, make it playable on modern day platforms, but that's not going to draw new gamers in. That's going to just appease the older gamer, the people that played it originally and liked that game. And that's why they do these remakes, is because they know, sure, we can remaster it for, you know, 20% of what it would cost to remake. We'll probably get our money back, you know, in 6 months, in 10 months, right? They'll sell it to the people who know the series, who know the game, who want to play it. But they won't bring in 1 million new fans, because it's, you know, the gameplay is dated. And they're not remaking it because they think this game deserves to be remade, because it tells a story, you know, that is so epic in its you know, scope, and, you know, it hits emotional beats that are so relevant to the modern day, you know, landscape of storytelling. None of that. They're doing it because they want to sell more. And it's not as if they're saying, cool, we're making a brand new Witcher game, right, that has new characters, new locations, you know, new threat. No, they're just remaking it. So it's like every time I see these movies where they're, what's the word I'm thinking of? You know, biographical, right? You know, we saw there was that movie that came out about the kids that were trapped in a cave in Thailand, right? It's like, cool. Okay, that's a story, you know, right? That's gonna, you know, tug at some heartstrings, all that sort of stuff. The problem is, if you want to know how that story ends, you can just Google it, and within 5 minutes have the full story, you know, they rely on those biopics where they talk about how, Stephen Hawking, how he was, in his youth and all that sort of stuff, how Albert Einstein, escaped Germany, all that sort of stuff. Every time these things come along, they're trying to tell a story that you can read within 3 pages of a book, right? 3 A4 pages of information, right? But they stretch it out to 2 hours because they want to, fill a screen. They want to get people to buy tickets to these things. And that's what a remake is. They're not doing it because they believe the story deserves to be told. They're doing it because they think they can get a lot of money and not have to invest a lot in development, right? They know the locations, right? They have the designs for what these cities, the map looks like, right? They know, the buildings here are made of this type of material because of this reason, right? They know all of that. They don't have to design everything to say, okay, this is why this region has to be this way. They already have that blueprint. They just have to build it again, right? It's like if you're building a house, you're designing it from scratch, it takes forever because you have to think of every conceivable aspect of it, right? Once you've built that one house, you can take that floor plan, go anywhere else in the country, build it again. You don't have to redesign anything because you've already designed everything out the wing the first time. That is my issue with these remakes, is they're not doing it because they believe that, these games, deserve to be seen, that they deserve to have a chance in the sun again. They're doing it because it's easy for them. It's the quickest way that they can make money. So, the statement here from Adam Badowski, who's the head of CD Projekt Red, he says, "The Witcher is where it all started for us for CD Projekt Red. It was the first game we ever made, and it was a big moment for us. Going back to this place and remaking the game for the next generation of gamers to experience just feels as big, if not bigger." It's like, okay, that doesn't make sense, right? If you build a coffee table, right, that's your first thing you ever build as a woodworker. You don't spend 20 years doing other things and then go back to making a coffee table, right? Nobody goes back in time and, remakes something they've made previously. Look, I could rant on this topic for hours because they're not doing it because they think it deserves to be around because it's the pinnacle of the gaming that they've ever made. That is not the case. They say that about every game. Then they make a new one and that's their best game ever, right? They're doing this because they know it's not as much effort to remake a game as it is to make something new. The amount of money that they invest in this will give them a quick turnaround, and it'll give them easy cash. That is why Silent Hill 2 was the one that was picked. It wasn't because, they thought that was the one they needed to start with. No, it's the one that people like, so that's what they're doing, right? Resident Evil 4, they finally committed to doing it because when they said, hey, we're going to remake Resident Evil 2, which 2 and 3 were the red-headed stepchilds of the Resident Evil series for a number of years because they were locked to, the PS1 and the 64. Whereas, Resident Evil Remake, Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? All those games got ported to modern platforms, but 2 and 3 didn't, right? So rather than just bring them across, update some of the visuals and all that, they just, decided to remake them because it was easy for them. And as Steve said in the comments, Resident Evil 3 Remake was an utter piece of garbage compared to the original because they didn't stick to what was there. They tried to change it and people hated what they did, right? They literally had a blueprint, they had a map saying this is where you start, this is the the stops along the way, this is the end where you need to get to, and they started out strong. Then instead of going straight down the road, they took a bunch of lefts and did whatever they did. They messed it up and they paid the price. So then they said, cool, we can do a remake of Resident Evil 4, that'll sell. Remakes are not worth it. They are an insult to the legacy and the history of the games. They are not worth gamers investing time and effort into, because if you want to play Resident Evil 4, that's on your Xbox right now. That's on your PC right now. Heck, 18 months ago, it released in VR, right? That game is literally on every modern platform, right? So they're remaking it to serve what purpose, apart from the fact they'll sell a bunch of more copies of a game that already exists? Who knows? Who knows why? So, that's my rant over. They don't need to exist. The fact they do is an insult, and I will never be okay with it. Moving on though, as you know, we like to look at the week ahead of what's coming in terms of games. Next week we'll do a deep dive into the month. It is not the first of the month, so I do not have my massive list of big games to pay attention to yet. But in terms of what's coming out in the first few days of November, 100%, there's another one for you. Skyrim released 11 years ago now, right? It's 11 years next month. You know, we had Skyrim Special Edition launch, you know, on the next gen consoles. Not next, but Xbox One and PlayStation 4. Then, you know, last year we had the Skyrim Anniversary Edition. You know, that just came to Switch. And who's to say they're not going to do another Skyrim, you know, Anniversary Edition this year, right? That game, you know, and they're not modifying it, they just keep re-releasing it. But a whole re-releasing of games, that's a whole nother topic. We'll get into that another day. But yeah. So next week, you know, we have the last day of October, being on the Monday, and then we have the first 4 days of November. Obviously, the Tuesday the 1st is when we'll get the PlayStation Plus games, and we'll start getting some of the Xbox games, depending on what they're doing with their games with gold. There's not a large number of games coming out in the next few days, or the first few days of the month. So on the 2nd of November, we'll see Doraemon Story Seasons Friends of the Great Kingdom released for Switch, PC, and PS5. That is a Story of Seasons game crossed over with Doraemon. It's the second game they've done that with. The 3rd, we'll see the release of The Chant from Prime Matter, which is a Play-On company. Sorry, not a Play-On company, it's an Embracer Group company, which is Play-On, which used to be Koch Media, which also owns THQ and a whole bunch of other things. That's sort of a, you know, a horror-ish game. That's PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC. On the 4th, we'll see the release of Harvestella for PC and Switch. That's the role-playing farming game from Square Enix. And that's it. The next sort of big lot of games coming the week after. So I said next week is very, very small. There's not a lot happening at all across the next sort of 5 days. Don't get me wrong, The Chant will draw in people. Harvestella is definitely going to have a crowd, you know, of fans that are going to get behind it. But the vast majority of games are coming out the week after that. But with that brings us to the end of the show. We will be back on Tuesday for more Splinter Cell. I have to redo the mission that I was doing the week just gone, because I used up all my bullets and I got caught into this little loop where I couldn't do anything, which made for a very challenging section. So we're restarting that mission. We'll go back through it. We'll be back next Friday with more Maxi-Geek Show. We'll be back in a regular sort of pattern for them, just for a few weeks, and then I'm off on a very overdue holiday. So we will not be doing this for a few weeks, but then we'll be streaming over the holiday break as well. Not my holidays, but the Christmas, New Year holidays, we'll be streaming over there, pumping out some Splinter Cell. With that all being said, we'll be back, as I said, on Tuesday for Splinter Cell. So until we see you online next time, happy gaming.